Been lately a lot of talk about the stock market, bonds, index funds. If you have heard any of these words, this is the video you pay utter and most attention to. Welcome to my journey, Pov. As usual, I have made a blueprint for you to explain you exactly what the indexed stock market, blah blah blah, all these big words really mean, that all these Wall Street people really just overcomplicate, and I'm going to simplify here it for you, and I am giving you first-hand experience because I have, again, through my mistakes in the last 2 to 3 years, learned what exactly needs to be done if you want to get into the stock market, and if you don't want to get into the stock market, that's up to you as well. But let's just begin. First things first, what exactly and how exactly you enter the stock market. I have been through this journey, and I'm telling you there is only one simple way to do it, and that is through index funds. But we will start firstly the 3 different types of funds and how people do invest into stock market, and then we'll go into the best one, which is index fund, and what exactly it means and what exactly it does, so you guys understand exactly what to do and how to invest. Firstly, hedge fund. I'm not going to go very deep into this because it's quite irrelevant for anyone who is as normal as myself and the people who are watching at the moment, because index fund essentially means it's managed by some super intelligent, super financially analytical people who create a hedge fund, i.e. a company vehicle where big rich people they pull their money and then they go out and buy certain companies passively or actively, which I'm not going to go into again what those things means, but for your general knowledge, you don't need to worry about hedge funds because you just don't have enough money to invest into it. Neither do I. Mutual funds is the second one, which is again a pool of investors. Now, mutual funds, people do fall for mutual funds because they're the sort of most common targets that people usually go for, because people, firstly, like I said, don't have enough knowledge to know and how to differentiate between these 3 types of funds. But like I said, mutual funds is something that is very common out there, and people with in financial markets, they will try to pull you to invest into a sort of company vehicle again, which then goes out and puts their money into different companies or different funds or whatever, and then they make money through it. But I'll tell you, mutual funds are absolutely the worst thing to do because they have an extremely high commission fees, and a lot of the financial experts who do claim to run a mutual fund group will actually, they don't work as a fiduciary. Fiduciary, for people to again simplify, just means for the financial analysts or financial people who run these funds to work in your best interest, which barely ever happens in this world anymore because everyone just wants to make money for themselves, which is fair enough. But I would highly not recommend to go towards mutual funds. One of the prime examples is a superannuation. A lot of the superannuations are actually just called superannuations because that's how they have created it as per the legal, how we have our legal facade here in Australia or in other countries as well. But they're essentially just a mutual fund that pull your money from your salaries and then go invest, and then you obviously also get your, if you have ever tried to categorize your superannuation, you would see that you get sort of the target of, like, do you want to invest into high risk, low risk, or whatever. It is essentially just that's what it tells you, that it's a freaking mutual fund. So you shouldn't, like I said, don't invest into it. As long as your superannuation's going into it, you make some money out of it, that's great. Like I said, for mutual funds, extremely high commission, so there is not much point left. You don't actually get any money for yourself. Even if they do end up making money, they take such high commissions out of it that you don't get much money into it, and then obviously considering capital gains hikes, etc., you don't make any money at the end of it. Which brings me to the best way to invest into a stock market, this will genuinely actually make you good money, and money that you could actually retire with and have a sustainable income towards the end of your career or progression or your life or whatever you want to do with it. So just to begin simply to explain you what index fund means, is index fund is index of the best companies. It's a created index which you can put your money into, and then it will compound over years. The best example is S&P 500. S&P 500, you would have heard this a lot, I would say, probably, if you have been listening to news or not, I'm not sure, but if you have probably heard about S&P 500, which is an index fund, which means it's an index of indices of the best 500 companies, which they obviously, some companies do good, some companies do bad, but this is an index for the best 500 companies, Fortune 500 in America. Not necessarily Fortune 500, but like they're the best 500 big companies picked in every sector, which could be your technology, construction, mining, banking, etc., etc. And they obviously are called S&P 500, which, like I said, is an index fund. So you just put your money into it, and it will compound over the years, because obviously the companies that are within this index are the best 500 companies, and then their growth is what gives you the money. So as those companies grow, their dividends fall into, if you have signed into a dividend. I'm actually skipping ahead, let me just get back to it, which is there are really two ways to invest into S&P 500. There are multiple really, but the best way you could do it in Australia is through investing into ETFs. ETFs again are referred to as exchange traded funds. So ETFs are a exchange traded funds for the index fund. So you can't really go directly buy S&P 500 index fund. You would have to go through an ETF, which is an SPY, is a very famous ETF, and also WOO. These are like the code words that are right next to those stocks that you're aiming to buy. So if you download any app, say Stake is a really good app, I would say. There are multiple other sort of apps that you can buy through, or you can buy through an actual broker, but you have to tell him that I want to only buy S&P 500, and this is the way, but then obviously he will charge you brokerage fee. I would say Stake is probably one of the best apps you could use, and I'm not sponsoring for them, I'm just saying they genuinely are, because I have been using Stake, and obviously they just list those exchange traded funds, and we just pay a certain amount of fee. Or other way to go through is Vanguard. Vanguard is a created company, like an exchange traded fund company, which takes your money and invests straight into the index fund, which is the S&P 500. And funny enough, if you compare the commission fees for SPY or VOO, which are the exchange traded funds for the index funds S&P 500, they are bare minimum. They are 0.09%, and for WOO is 0.03%, which is actually the lowest commission fee for trading. So that means that for every $100 you put into index funds, they will take 9 cents or 3 cents as a commission fee, which is bare minimum. You can afford it, anyone can afford it, as long as you keep putting your money into it, and then it compounds over the years, and then you retire happily ever after. One really good thing about index funds is, in general, S&P 500 is this is focused completely on S&P 500, by the way, but there are also other index funds like NASDAQ, which is completely technology focused. So like all the big tech companies like Nvidia, OpenAI, blah blah blah, they're all within NASDAQ or Dow Jones. I just don't know much about those, so I'm not talking about those, and I have never invested into them, so I'm not going to recommend you something that I haven't done personally. I have personally invested into S&P 500 for the last three and a half years now, and every time I invest a certain amount of money out of my salary into it, and it has compounded over the years, and it's going to, in a few years, these ETFs will also give you dividends if you want to. It's just dependent on how you've set it up. So getting back to the third point, which was S&P 500 generates a 10% average growth per annum, which is very good. It's amazing for given there. I'm not sure if there are any other assets around the world that will give you this kind of growth, but 10% is quite a fair bit of growth. Even housing market sort of gives you that growth, but like over a certain amount of time. But 10% year on year till you retire, if you start early and you know, by the time you retire, you keep investing into it, you would probably end up with a lot of money. And I will give you the examples I have calculated with sort of John and Bob. These are two mates who started investing into S&P 500. John started investing into the index S&P 500 at $300 per month at the age of 19 years old, which is quite young. And I have calculated that he will retire with 1.8 to $2 million circa, which is a decent sum of money when you retire. I calculated, obviously, it's not all in my brain, but I'm just writing these down. And then Bob, who is John's friend, got to know about this scheme from John, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to start investing. But he was a bit late, so he started investing at 27 years old. So people my age, which is all people, you know, Bob's age, will end up, if they consistently invest $300 a month, which is bare minimum. You can go way more than that, and obviously, you know, end up with a large stack of money at the end of it. They will end up with somewhere between 1.4 to 1.6 million dollars, which is again a huge chunk of money. And now you're probably thinking that no, it's not really a huge chunk of money. By the time I retire, these dollars are not going to have any value. Well, you're right, but if you really think about it, 10% annual growth. If you think about it, a normal inflation should be, which the government really wants to target year on year for the economy to boom or to, you know, do well, is about 2 to 3%, which is the target band range. We have seen some extreme years over the years as well, which we have just passed, and now they're back in target range. But if you say inflation by 2 to 3%, which kind of doesn't really, you know, happen anymore, and then your wages don't really grow as quick as well. Inflation probably, and considering all the other assets also don't grow at the same pace. You just, you know, you're pretty well set. If you just have a decent sum of money, you can do a lot with it still. You know, about $2 million or, you know, 1.5 to 1.6 million dollars is still a fair bit of money. And well, by the time you retire, you can have this and do whatever the hell you want with it. But I think as a person who has invested into index fund, I can only tell you to just keep, you know, to put your money into index funds, because that is probably one of the best investments in my opinion. Now there is Bitcoin out there, which I have been sort of researching into and seeing what is the potential of it. Index fund is already proven. It's been around for years, and it has seen heaps of booms and busts, and it has obviously seen a lot of corrections. But over the year and over all these years, S&P 500 has made a ridiculous amount of money for a lot of people. Obviously, willingly, if you are willing to invest a lot more money into it, $300 a month is what I've gone these calculations by. But if you're wanting to invest, you know, upwards of $1,000 a month, you can see a way greater growth. So it's just obviously all dependent on how you want to approach it and how you want to do it. I personally would say and recommend that yes, keep doing it, because recently we have also seen in America that, you know, the legislation has passed a bill where every newborn gets $1,000 worth of S&P 500, and you know, they can choose whatever they want to do with it. But as you know, getting $1,000 for every newborn, I would say that all that money going into S&P 500 is also going to give returns to all the other investors as well, if you think about it. So this is it for the video, and I'll wrap it up, and hopefully this was very helpful to you, and I hope that, you know, you invest into S&P 500 and make yourself some good money.